So that's our next discussion. It's a big one, really, because it affects, Nigeria as a whole, every nook and cranny of the country. And this evening, to take a look at this, we're in the dying moments of that 30-day period which the president has to sign or not to sign the electoral bill. We're joined by Mr. Ezewawago, who's an election monitor. He joins us via Zoom, as well as Mr. Samson Itodo, who's Executive Director of YAGA Africa. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program this evening to discuss this very important topic that concerns the bedrock, some will say, of democracy. So the president is yet to, officially let Nigerians know what his decision on that bill is. So for you, what do you sense? Do you sense a reluctance? Do you sense perhaps due process? Or this is all just normal?
Well, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. First, it's unfortunate that we are at this particular point in the electoral reform process. Even though the president is still within the constitutional time frame for assenting or declining assent to a particular piece of legislation, but it's sad that for a process that began about 2 years ago, for a process that enjoyed multi-stakeholder engagement, both from the Ministry of Justice, INEC, civil society, and the National Assembly, it's rather unfortunate that at this moment, Nigerians do not know where the president stands, and there's uncertainty as to the passage or the assent of the electoral amendment. There are three key issues that we must note. That one, the current piece of legislation before the president is a reflection of the will and aspiration of the Nigerian people. And we expect that the president would have made do his promise of bequeathing to Nigerians a legal framework that not only guarantees the sanctity of the ballot, but also defends the independence of our institution. Second is the fact that this particular process is coming at a critical juncture where the legal framework for off-cycle elections and the general elections ought to have been concluded just to fast-track the process of preparation. In less than 3 weeks, the primaries for the Ekiti governorship elections will commence on the 4th of January. The primaries for the Osun governorship elections will commence in February. And we've got FCT elections on February 12th. Now, this new electoral act should have, guided the conduct of these elections, because there are new innovations in the amendment process. So the entire planning, for these elections and the general elections is dwarfed by the delays in the passage of this legislation. The last critical point is the fact that it is worrisome that at this material time, when the National Assembly is considering the appropriation bill for 2022, the legal framework is yet to be concluded, and the National Assembly is going to pass the 2022 appropriation bill on Tuesday. So what will now be the basis, for the elections budget? Because the provisions in the Electoral Act the Electoral Bill have grave implications, for the 2022 budget. So it's just a cloud of uncertainty that is avoidable, but it's just sad that we have subjected, a fantastic piece of legislation to partisan politics. And we have traded, based on our observation, we've traded, public interest with partisan interest. And I hope that, the president, yes, he still has up to think that his communication to the National Assembly is an assent to this legislation, because any delay, if he declines or he calls for a reconsideration, it means we will have to wait until 2022 to conclude the amendment process. And that will not bode well, for the 2023 elections.
So just before I take Mr. Wago's opening comments, let's just bring you a news just in. Well, Canada has lifted the travel restriction which it placed on Nigeria and 9 other African countries with effect from midnight on Saturday. The restriction was imposed to curb the spread of the COVID-19 Omicron variant into the country. Well, other African nations affected are South Africa, Mozambique, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Eswatini, Namibia, Malawi, and Egypt. Again, Canada has lifted the travel restriction which it placed on Nigeria and 9 other African countries with effect from midnight on Saturday. So that's news just in. Let's return to our conversation. Well, Mr. Wago, thank you for staying with us as well. And I wonder what your thoughts are really, because some would say that you can tell what will happen based on what has happened. We've been here before in 2018, and I mean, we know what happened. That's why we are where we are today. So for you, seeing the trend of things, do you think we'll probably see a repeat of what happened in 2018, or we'll move forward?
Well, I think that the bigger challenge we have right now will be to begin to situate why, at this point in time, if the president was going to be assenting or refusing to assent, we are not able to get reasons why that has not happened just a day to go. I think that the push and pull from partisan interests have befuddled the ability of the president to take a decision that is ordinarily simple. It's simple because in the course of the engagement for this electoral bill amendments, we have thought that the office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice will be embedded in the whole gamut of the process in such a way that when it gets to this point, the idea would have been that the T's will have been crossed and the I's dotted. But I think we just have to hold our breath and see what happens in the next 12 hours. This president has a responsibility to bequeath a legacy of transparent, credible, free, fair elections. And one of the ways that he can do that will be to be able to come out at every point in time, open straight up on where he stands on the issues that bother a lot of election and electoral integrity enthusiasts. So it's just unfortunate. It's something that is worrying and of very deep concern that we have to perhaps have to go the route that we went through the 8th Assembly again, and all the pitfalls that needed to have been foreclosed for us not to go through this path were already put out in the engagement for this electoral amendment bill. But let's keep our fingers crossed. If he doesn't assent, we will be able to see the reasons why he didn't assent and then examine them and then take it from there.
Do you think the president's trip to Turkey, because the president is in Turkey as I speak with you for the Turkey-Africa Summit, do you think his trip to Turkey will affect this? I mean, what do you think the implication of that trip will be on the signing or otherwise of this bill?
Well, what I just worry why it has to take this long. We know the president is not in the country. We know also that perhaps this should have happened. But when you have a minister and attorney general who is himself embedded in partisan politics, that is the challenge that you have. Because the issues that are perhaps holding down this law will have to do with the issue around whether we are going to have direct or indirect primaries. And that has pitched political actors in the political spectrum in different places. And lobbying the president at this time, when you now have the man who has to clearly explain to the president. I know that INEC has made its position very clear, and that position of INEC is in tandem with the position of the Nigerian people, which was canvassed during those bills. So what we need to do is to extricate politics from the reform process. If we are not able to do that, we will continue to go around in circles the way we have done with this. And it's unfortunate that the Electoral Amendment Bill is the one that is always suffering this kind of hitch when it comes to presidential assent. But I just hope this National Assembly, if they are able to have the lever to override the president and then give the Nigerian people the law that they expect at this time.
Well, Mr. Itodo, this conversation, so Mr. Wagu has taken us further into the controversy about direct and indirect. He's also referenced the veto aspect. We'll get to that. But regarding the direct and indirect angle, the debate and the controversy we've seen, do you think this is big enough? This is monumental enough to cause the president to withhold his assent? The presidency has confirmed that the Attorney General has advised the president. So this debate, direct, indirect primaries within parties, is it big enough an issue to hold back the president's assent?
Well, I don't think it's big enough compared to the other amendments or the other innovations in the bill. But one of the key functions of political parties is candidate recruitment, and they approach the electoral reform as and the electoral law as their rules of professional conduct. And if you look at, most pre-election cases, the acrimonious nature of candidate selection raises the salience of that particular provision as to determining the mode of selection of candidates, because most political parties are simply involved in candidate recruitment. So for them, this is very crucial and it's very important. And all this is just the politics, of 2023 and how parties will determine who becomes their candidate. So for the parties is a crucial amendment. But if you look at all the amendments, to a large extent, I don't think this is quite important and critical to the integrity of elections management. But this relates to candidate selection, and it's part of the electoral cycle, a key activity within the electoral process. But I must say, whether direct or indirect primaries, none of these processes are insulated from manipulation. And so the president ought to have made up his mind as to where he wants to stand. And I want to say that if I were the president, and if the president would listen to Nigerian people, is to assent to the bill before him. And if there is need, for further amendments to provisions, then they can introduce a bill, to amend the section. We've done that before in 2010 when the electoral bill was passed. There was need 2 months later, to amend the Electoral Act in relation to voter registration. And a bill was sent to the National Assembly, and the National Assembly did amend, those provisions. So I think because of the expediency that this entire process requires, the president should go ahead, and assent to the bill. And in the event he doesn't assent to the bill, I hope the National Assembly will stand with the Nigerian people and veto the president.
And that is something we've heard time and again. But gentlemen, we're in our concluding moments. And let me just wind down first with Mr. Itodo. So if a president does not sign this bill into law, do you think that hinders or affects his promise to bequeath to Nigerians an improved electoral system or process when he leaves office? Would we still have time to come up with, perhaps an alteration or a correction, depending on what the issue will be, ahead of a 2023 election?
I think if the president declines assent, he'll be reneging on his commitments from the world go that he will bequeath to Nigerians an electoral process. I say this with all sense of responsibility, that given the engagement and the approach adopted by the National Assembly to get to this stage, all the stakeholders, including the Minister of Justice, was involved in this process. Civil society was involved. And so I see no reason why the president is delaying. And so if he declines assent to this bill in its current state, it negates and it's at variance with the commitment that he made. Because if this moves to 2022, it's going to affect election planning.
Right.
And when you undermine the Electoral Commission and its preparations for 2023, you are heading for a disaster if care is not taken. So I hope that he assents to it, and if he doesn't, National Assembly should stand with the Nigerian people and veto the president.
So, Mr. Wagu, a concluding moment on this one. I mean, who knows? Maybe the president has, forwarded his response to the National Assembly already, or done something about it. We don't quite know just yet. But what's the way forward for you?
The way forward.
Please go on.
To push, ensure that the kind of electoral process that we want is given to Nigerian people. The bigger issue is that we're not going to make light of the fact that the political parties are not in the conversation for electoral integrity. They are more interested in this one that Samson is saying is not as, it may not be as key. The interest of the political parties is in the leadership, is in the candidate recruitment process. And so the challenge is what to do with the direct or indirect primaries. The lobby is intense. The chief executive of states are lobbying very intensely. Members of the National Assembly are also in the fight for their survival. But in all of this, the Nigerian people should take the issues that concern Nigerian people should take the place of primacy. And that's why we thought that the president would lean on the side of the Nigerian people.
Well, gentlemen, I must sincerely thank you for joining us on the program tonight to share your thoughts on the electoral bill. Mr. Ezewan Wagu, election monitor, and Mr. Samson Itodo, the executive director of Yaga Africa. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that's our program for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. We still have a day to go. We'll keep our eyes on that one and bring you the latest updates. I'm Kayadoki Kilu. Good night.